So it gives me a pleasure to introduce Dr. Manish Singhal, Professor of Organization Behavior XLRI, an eclectic profile with qualifications in mechanical engineering, finance, general management, organizational behavior, and sociology, and experience in the disciplines of anthropology, archaeology, journalism, and yoga as sadhana and therapy. Dr. Singhal is the author of Spirituality at Work, a study of Indian non-profit organizations. He's also served as a visiting faculty at ISB Hyderabad in Calcutta and has presented his research at one of the national and two international conferences, which has resulted in one State Journal article and an international book publication as well. In his avatar as Secretary, Research Council, Vivekanand Kendra Institute of Culture, he has led the team that formulated, planned, and executed various anthropological research and documentation studies in Arunachal Pradesh and Assam. Dr. Manish has guided a couple of PhD students on the thesis
Harpreet, your voice is breaking up. Can you hear us? Harpreet, your voice is breaking up.
Moral and spiritual leadership.
Harpreet, can you hear us?
Process.
Can you hear us? I think your voice has been breaking up last 1 minute or so.
Is it better now?
It's much better now. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about it. I just connected from my phone network. Continuing, Professor Manish has guided a couple of PhD students on their thesis on leadership emergence, moral and spiritual leadership, mentoring process, and the role of spousal network overlap in networks in organizations. Drawing from his experience at Vivekanand Kendra and subsequent explorations in the Indian cultural heritage, he has developed and conducted several courses and modules on yogasana, pranayama, meditation for corporate executive education participants. We are humbled to have him amongst us to share the wealth of knowledge in the area of well-being. Our second panelist is Lokesh Nigam, co-founder and director at Kognoz Research and Consulting. In his 20 years of management consulting, he has worked intensively in change, employee experience, organization transformation, digital HR transformation, leadership. We welcome you, Lokesh. And the third panelist is myself, Harpreet, leading talent and learn products, partnerships, and solutions for ASEAN region in Kognoz. Moving forward, I would request Dr. Singhal if he could take this forward, the self journey on well-being.
It's a pleasure to see everyone here. And I thought that what we will do today is kind of reflect upon the state of affairs that we are in today. And from there, reflect upon as to how it could probably move us forward all individually as well as organizationally towards wellness. And that is what I thought that I'll start with. So one is that people have been saying that these are unprecedented times, this is the new normal, etc., etc. But I want to preface my part of the presentation with that it is not really new. Not really new. And I kind of support that contention by the idea that we have always lived two different lives. One is a life internal and the other is the life external. And if you look at it, the content of the external probably keeps changing, which probably has changed significantly today. But if you abstract from there, you will probably realize to yourself that the kind of distinction between the external and the internal may not really have changed as much. Okay? And therefore one is the external, the other is the internal. And within that, this particular divide, if I could call it that, or this particular challenge of trying to navigate the two together is probably the one which hasn't changed at all. And in fact, I would argue that the external situations may probably have changed, yes, but the most precious sort of a change will probably come about in the internal. And it is in that particular direction that I would like to kind of take you further, to the extent that I'll remind you of something which happened in our country many, many years back, thousands of years back. And ours has been a land of seeking. And here there was this one seeker who goes to his guru. He goes to his guru, and this particular story comes to us from the Taittiriya Upanishad. Maybe some of you would have heard of it earlier. And what does it say? So it says that this particular disciple goes to his guru, and he asks his guru. He asks a question to his guru and asking him, who am I? Now, the guru is not the one to give him very easy, straightforward answers, because otherwise that would not be valued, right? And therefore, this guru then tells him that you tell me, you give it some thought, come back to me, and then you tell me as to who you are. So this particular disciple, he goes. This particular disciple goes, and then he comes back, and he comes back to his guru, and then he says that the first thing that I think of, how do I realize that someone else has come? It is when I see that particular person. And therefore, ultimately, it is this body that you are. Okay. And which is something that we, in this particular tradition, we call it the Annamaya Kosha. So the physical frame, which is prepared by the food that you eat, that is the body that you are. Okay. So this guru, once again, he applauds him for what he has done. And then he says that, yes, you are right, but then probably there is something more to it. Why don't you go and investigate into it further? So this disciple goes back, researches into it, thinks about it, meditates upon it, and then he comes back, and then he realizes that probably when the person goes, the body remains, but we do not say that the person is there. And in fact, that particular body may be buried or it may be burned, but we somehow dispose of the body. So what is it which is there in the body which is keeping this person alive? And then he says probably it is the breath. Okay. It is probably the breath. So he comes back to his guru, and then he tells his guru that this is what I found, that ultimately it is the prana inside the body, which is who you are. So the guru is happier now, but then he still says that yes, you are in the right direction, but probably from that gross to the subtle, maybe the individual is more subtle than just the prana. And therefore, could you go back and reflect some more on this? So this particular disciple then goes back again, kind of sits down, closes his eyes, and reflects upon it a whole lot. And then he says that if there is this I that I am, and if I identify it with the breath that I have, because that is the most obvious manifestation of the energy that you have. So does this particular energy go up and down, or does it stay constant? Because my sense of the I does not change much. Okay, so he goes back and then he reflects upon it, and he feels that probably even this prana, at one point of time, it could be flowing very smoothly. At another point, it could be very shallow. At another point, given a different set of circumstances, it probably is going very fast. And therefore, what is it that has changed? So he realizes that probably it is the kind of thoughts that I'm having, which is making my prana change its form and its manifestation. So he's elated with the discovery. He comes back to the guru. And then he says that, yes, you were right. So it is not only the pranamaya part, but it is probably the mind who I am, right? And therefore, ultimately, it is the mind. It is something that I feel I am. So this guru once again kind of applauds him for what he has done, but says, please take it further. This guy goes back, sits down. And then he realizes that my mind is a bundle of likes and dislikes. Do my likes and dislikes stay constant? that which I liked during my childhood is probably not something which I like now. That I disliked then is probably something that I like now. And therefore, what is it which determines this change? Okay. And therefore, what is it by which I'm able to find as to what is it that I like, what is it that I do not like? And he realizes that from childhood to adulthood to going further, probably what is changing over a period of time is my understanding of what it is about. Lo and behold, what he identifies is that it is Vijnanamaya Kosh, it is discernment, that which allows you to be able to differentiate between one and the other. So probably that's what it is. Okay, so this guy comes back now once again and shares his finding. Remember, all of this is a scientific discovery which is happening. So this guy comes back to his guru, and with his guru he says that it is Vijnanamaya Kosh, discern. Okay, so intellect, that is who I am. So once again, okay, so the guru says that yes, you are in the right path, but you'll have to go further, and so on and so forth. So this guy goes back, closes his eyes, and then he tries to think some more. He tries to find out as to what is the objective of all of this intellect, of all of this discernment. And he realizes that through our life, as we are differentiating between good, bad, ugly, etc., somewhere or the other, so the objective is probably that which is unconditioned bliss, ananda. Okay, and given that we can only recognize what we have inside. For example, if you come to me speaking to me in Japanese and I do not know that language, I won't be able to make head or tail of whatever it is that you're saying. And therefore, it would become that much more difficult for me to follow. So whatever it is that I see outside, I am able to make sense of that particular cognition only when I will have something here. So given that I am seeking that somehow or the other, all that I'm doing is that I'm taking away the veil which is separating me from it. Comes back to the guru again. Lo and behold, what I have found is that it is Anandamaya Kosh. So the disciple had started with the Annamaya Kosh, the physical gross body that we have, has moved to the subtler stuff, which is that of the Pranamaya Kosh, the breath, moved from there to the sheath of likes and dislikes, etc., which is that of the mind, has moved from there to the Vijnanamaya Kosh, which is that of discernment, and has eventually come to this aspect of bliss, that ultimately this is who you are. It comes back to the guru, and the guru says, yes, you are close, but still some distance apart. Could you go back, please? Okay. Now this guy has already spent so much amount of time. He goes back. And then he goes back to realize for himself that ultimately, whether it is the body, whether it is my vital energy, whether it is the mind, whether it is the discernment, whether it is the bliss. So he asks himself as to who is the one who experiences all this. Okay? If you and I, if we look back, think about it. If you go back to just 1 year back, okay? Could you imagine as to where you were, what was happening to you, etc., etc.? There is this sense of continuity that you have across time, across space. I could ask you about a particular situation that you went through in your childhood or when you were 10 years old or anything like that. And I think while you may be able to recollect all of those experiences, you will see that sense of continuity across time and space. Okay. Fair enough. So this guy thinks of it, and the Taittiriya Upanishad says that once this guy realizes that he's pure consciousness, he does not come back to his guru for a confirmation. He has already realized. What I'm arguing for here is that if we, during this opportunity that we have here, could we try to use this opportunity to go deeper still, such that this constant struggle that is there between the external and the internal, we will probably have a more stable base internally to be able to relate much better with whatever it is which is happening outside. you all must be getting invited to a whole lot of webinars. And there is a particular webinar which is being organized by the Isha Academy, Sadhguru. And I am told that it is starting in another 2 days. And the title of it is Never Let a Crisis Go Waste. I was quite enthused by that particular title. Okay, so we might be in a difficult situation right now, but then would it be possible for you and I to make use of this particular opportunity to be able to come to terms with who we are? And therefore, I thought that maybe if we look at our personal level and we try to find out as to what is it that we can do, possibly this particular framework of the Panch Kosha, Pancha being 5, Kosha being the sheath, maybe we will be able to come to terms with each one of these levels. Remember, all of these are happening simultaneously to us, right? So that is who we are. And therefore, what is it that we could do while we are physically isolated, but hopefully more socially connected? And therefore, what is it that we can do? And I thought that I will divide a number of things here under this very framework. So to begin with, if I start by looking at my Annamaya Kosha, which is the physical frame that I have, the body that I have, maybe I can remind myself, Sharira Madhyam Khali Dharma Sadhana. Ultimately, it is the body which is the tool that you and I have to be able to do anything that we need to do. And therefore, to be able to take better care of it, could we possibly take care of our diet? Okay. I was looking at a news item a few days back, and within that, what it was saying is that the most searched Google term these days is Rasgulla, Gulab Jamun, Jalebi being prepared at home. Okay, and therefore, would it be possible for you and I to start looking at as to what kind of diet we are having and what is the influence of the diet upon this mind, body, intellect that we have here? And therefore, the first one is that of diet. The second one possibly could be that of sleep. Just yesterday, okay, so you would have been told in my kind of bio just now that I was with Vivekananda Kendra. So I've been teaching Yogasana Pranayama meditation for the last 25 years and more. And yesterday I started taking part in Shivanand Ashram Gurgaon's program on pranayama and meditation. So there's an eminent teacher from there who has started giving online lessons. And those were the lessons that I started taking part in just yesterday. Today is the second day and I'm missing out on it because this webinar is what I had committed to. So the teacher was asked. So he expects people to do a Shavasana. And there was this participant who asks the teacher that I've fallen asleep in my Shavasana, which is the state with most of us if we try it. And what does the teacher reply with? So the teacher responds, I hope you realize how very tired you are. Somehow the other in our performance-oriented, outcome-driven culture that we live in, we tend to take great pride in how much less sleep I can get by with. I'm no different, the same. And therefore, could we start looking at going to bed at a particular point of time and waking up feeling refreshed, so that you do not need an alarm clock, you don't need someone shaking you, or you don't need your spouse sprinkling water on you to make you come awake, and therefore sleep. Okay, so to be able to overcome that, and obviously, keeping this body fit, you and I, we need to exercise. Okay, and therefore at the physical level, we may take a look at these three things that are available. As we move to the next level, which is that of the Pranamaya Kosha, would it be possible for us, okay, so we may be quarantined, we may be isolated, etc. Could we please take some fresh air? Because it is supposed to contribute to the prana. Obviously, pranayama, etc. If you have been introduced to it, if you have been trained into it, you could do that on your own, but otherwise fresh air and diaphragmatic deep breathing. If you and I, we need to learn how to breathe well, you and I, we should take a look at infants, how they sleep. So when they sleep, they are using the full capacity of the lungs, diaphragmatic breathing. And if possible, given that we Indians are more susceptible to it, then we take more sunlight, the vitamin D. So 3 things at the body level, 3 things at the level of the pranamaya kosh. Now let us come to the idea of the mind, which is that of the manomaya kosh. So the manomaya kosh, all of our sensory activity, all of our motor activities, they are directed by the manomaya kosh. The manomaya kosh being the seat of likes and dislikes. And given that I started with the diet at the body part, what I want all of us to start paying more attention to is the idea of what kind of sensory impressions are we getting? What kind of sensory impressions? How much of violence and sensual stuff are we consuming? Given the kind of sanitation procedures that all of us must be using now, particularly before we start taking food, I wonder whether through all of our sense organs, whatever inputs that we are gathering, do we apply similar sanitation principles there? And therefore, could we start looking at what are we getting? Some of us might have seen that there's this lady from Brahma Kumari Ashram, Shivani Devi. And she has been writing a number of articles in the newspapers and other magazines, wherein she says that if you continue to read about COVID, if you continue to read about how many people have fallen ill, etc., etc., if you continue doing that, you are further weakening your mind. It is not that you do not do it. It is not that you do not know, but the point is, can we shift our attention to what we can do about it, rather than what it is that will leave us more and more concerned and more afraid. And therefore, at the level of the mind, at the level of likes and dislikes, one is what kind of sensory impressions we are getting. Now, what kind of professional challenges may we take up? So I do not want this particular lockdown period to become another rat race. No, that is not what it is. But then, would it be possible for us? So the kind of excuses that we used to have earlier, that I cannot make time for this, that, and the other, realize that you and I, we don't need to commute these days. You can't. Many of us may be saving 2 hours, 3 hours, even 4 hours on a daily basis. And therefore, what is it that we can take up as a professional challenge? Can we look at cultivating joy through supportive relationships? And therefore, that will be at the level of the Manomaya Kosh. At the level of the Vijnanamaya Kosh, at the level of the Vijnanamaya Kosh, which is that of discernment, which is that of buddhi. Okay? Many of us would have heard this particular Subhashitam. Ahar nidra bhaya maithunancha samanya metat pashubhe narana buddhire hitesham adhiko vishesha buddhir vihina pashubhe samana. Ahar, food, nidra, sleep, bhaya, fear, mathun, sexual conquest. There is no difference between an animal and a human being on these 4 aspects. Buddhir hitesha. It is the intellect alone, adhiko vishesha, whether it is more or less, which would differentiate a human being from other animals. Okay? And therefore, what is it that we are using it for? Would we be able to identify a particular purpose for us? A particular uplifting, elevating purpose for us. And I would argue before you that a purpose which is more self-driven, which is more about I, me, myself, is not sustainable. And therefore, could we enlarge our identity to be able to start looking at the larger circles that we belong to? A child in a family is able to live when the parents identify more with the family as a unit rather than themselves as individuals. An individual employee compared to the department, compared to the organization. Possibly the larger identity should take primacy. And it is when we use this, when we pursue this, that we probably will be able to generate the energy, the impetus from that particular purpose. We will be able to deliver the impact in terms of selfless service. Swami Vivekananda had said, they alone live to live for others. The rest are more dead than alive. And therefore, therefore, I would argue that while the external situation may have indeed changed, the external situation may have indeed changed a lot, what it is providing for us is a huge opportunity for us to be able to look at a particular holistic framework by which you and I will be able to elevate ourselves and probably use this crisis for a larger purpose. And from whatever it is that we have seen in this particular journey for the self, that we deepen our own self, become more established in something which is more solid, and then probably from there take it further. And I would like you to reflect upon the last 15-20 minutes that I've spent with you and think about that as you move from this particular session. Would it be possible to see as to what is it which you could probably start working on? And if we want to start with the one which is the easiest to work with, remember those small bites. What is the way to have an elephant? One small bite at a time. And therefore, what I'm asking for right now is to launch a particular poll which will take your inputs on what may perhaps be the easiest to work on. Harpreet? Okay, I'm giving you a minute. Okay, so amongst the 5 sheets that we're talking about, which may perhaps be the one that you would wish to tackle from right after this session? And could we start working on something right here, right now? Okay. Harpreet, do we have the responses?
Yeah.
Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so Annamaya Kosh, easiest probably would be to start with where we are. And given that we are that much more conscious about the body, so probably getting enough exercise, getting enough sleep, and taking care of the diet that we are having, obviously. Pranamaya Kosh, so even the doctors are telling you, okay, take care of what you breathe. All of us with our own masks here. And probably, so taking care of our energy as to what is it which raises it, what is it which brings it down is probably the one there. And if we look at the mind part there, and therefore what kind of impressions are we gathering? What kind of food are we taking from these 5 sense organs that we have here? So the impressions part, looking at various professional challenges. So I recently did a course on self-leadership. I was a student there. Okay, so that was one which I participated in. And I developed a complete module on emotional intelligence also. So the kind of professional challenges. I'm thankful to this from the Janta curfew day to today. The 4 of us, my 2 kids, my wife and I, we are spending an hour and a half daily together to be able to get to know each other better. Try to take a look at what the day has been for each one of us. And today, even my teenager looks forward to being together. Okay. And therefore those joyful, supportive relationships. So that is at the level of the mind. and probably being able to move towards that selfless service. Yes. Okay. Yes. Harpreet, would you like to take over, please?
There is some issue with the sharing. Just give me a second.
Okay.
Okay.
Lokesh, are you taking over?
So if you can continue sharing the slides, maybe we
Okay.
can, yeah, we can
Okay.
just run it from there.
Okay, fair enough.
Harpreet, is that okay for you?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I think that would be okay.
Okay.
Okay, right.
Okay.
I think, maybe I can show the screen now. Will be okay?
Yeah, visible now. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Now, thank you so much, Dr. Singhal, for sharing the cell journey. I think it was amazing insight to understand all the 5 koshas. Now, moving on to the next, we would definitely like to understand the current state of well-being during the time of crisis, and what are some of the practices by some of the great organizations who have been leading in the areas of well-being. So here is a quick statistics on 15 major economies, and majority of employees in these economies, they state that the well-being is really important. And we see a range of 60% to 46%, and India is here. So hence the entire talent strategy, which the organizations really need to relook in and constituted around the well-being of the employees, which will further be enhanced since the agile working, the autonomous working, and more digital enablement is happening across the world because of this crisis. Moving on to the next, what are some of the great organizations practicing? Novartis is a healthcare company. It has a vision of being a trusted leader in changing practice of medicine, employ science-based innovation to create better outcomes for its patients across the world. And it should therefore come as a no surprise that it also focuses a lot of energies on the lives and welfare of the own employees. And prevention is what Novartis really believes in. So Novartis has a program, which is Be Healthy program, which is launched globally across 32 countries in 76 locations and reaching out to 80% of its employees today. There are 4 components of this program, which is Move, Choose, Know, and Manage. Move talks about the entire physical aspect. The organization conducts corporate challenges at team and individual level, sports events, sessions on yoga, strength, endurance, flexibility, different needs, etc. Choose is all about the eating habits. So what are some of the dietary options which are being given to employees? Interactive sessions with the chef himself. Food festivals is something which they conduct. Know is all about the awareness sessions, awareness around the different aspects of well-being. And manage is the overall ergonomics in terms of relaxation techniques, sleep campaign, parenting skills, etc. Novartis also has different apps, right? Be Healthy app is one of their apps, and Healthy Lifestyle Assessment. So this is an app which is which employees, they self-reflect on themselves and take on a well-being journey of their own as per their interest. The second organization which has really worked in the areas is the Colgate and Palmolive. So the mantra of well-being in Colgate and Palmolive is inclusion and caring for the employees. And there are 4 levers on which Colgate and Palmolive has worked on to enhance wellness at the workplace. One is leadership. So the kind of leaders who manage teams and who are responsible for nurturing the organizational culture, which is also living the values of caring, global teamwork, and continuous improvement of Colgate Palmolive. Second is relationships at work. The quality of relationships in the organizations and collaboration between people across levels, geographies, and departments. Third is purpose. The meaning and purpose people experience at work and the connection they feel to the company's values and strategy. So intellectual, emotional, occupational, and spiritual well-being depends on the meaning that employees derive from their work, the purpose behind their hard work. Employees need not to know that they're just chasing for sales or profit goals. And the fourth key lever is the different programs, the formal policies, and its impact on well-being. 4 things which Colgate Palmolive is leading is prevention and awareness, healthy lifestyles, organizational support, resilience and stress, and it is all linked to their ERP. The third case study, and Aditya Birla, who've been working in the area of wellness from quite some time. And apart from Novartis and Colgate Palmolive, whatever I've shared, 2 very unique dimensions which ABG really works is on financial well-being and as well as social well-being of its employees. So it provides a lot of financial help to the employees with respect to their education, also with respect to their lifestyle. And in social well-being, a World of Opportunity Foundation is there, which works at all the levels with the larger society and giving back to the overall community. So these were some of the best practices which were published in the NHRDN journal and have been highly recognized in the organizations. There are a few more, and like we can share as and when you reach out to us. Now, moving on to the next session, I request Lokesh to take it forward.
Thank you, Harpreet. Thank you, sir. I think it was wonderful listening to both of you. I think initially on the self journey, it's really so from the point of view of both the individual and the organization, it is very important that a balance is maintained between the well-being, at the personal level and at the organization level. People who are focused on well-being make better organizations, and organizations that are focused on well-being make better people, better employees, and therefore better businesses. And we have seen it all around. I think Harpreet shared some case studies, but when we look around some of the organizations, in fact, Acceleri, Professor Manish Singhal comes from there. Jamshedpur itself, the Tata Sons and the work that they have done is a whole ecosystem that has been created, which everybody talks about, and how the entire city comes alive, from a point of view of both taking care of people as well as making a lot of good business sense. One of the organizations which has been living the longest in our country. So well-being makes personal good sense as well as makes good organizational sense. So we in Kognoz started looking at this particular subject about a year back, and we thought, how is it that people, so we all know that self-motivated people are one of the best and are able to concentrate and able to contribute, and both for their personal selves as well as the organization and the larger society. And the selfless service we saw in the Anandamay Kosh. So people who are self-determined, people who are more self-motivated, are the people who, in all senses of contribution, will be focusing more on everybody's well-being. So what in the organizations, inside the organizations, we have seen a lot of engagement surveys, and there's a lot of discussion which happens, and a lot of actually investments by organizations that go into engagement and keeping the engagement high. But engagement is not something which is necessarily will always result in uh, good outcomes, both at the personal level as well as the the organizational level. And I think I was talking to Professor Singhal only the other day, and he actually said that happy cows may not give more milk, right? So I think that you mentioned it the other day when we were talking, and so if happy cows are not going to produce more milk, then why do we invest so much on engagement studies and engagement surveys? And what is it that make people more self-determined? Is there something that makes them more self-determined? Is there something that can be done both from the organizational point of view as well as the personal point of view, in terms of adding value at the individual level, that makes them more self-determined? So that's the study, and that's the question we're asking ourselves. And under and from the point of view of this study, we actually crafted it hypothesizing that well-being should be a very important constituent. And this well-being is something which should be studied, and its correlation with self-determination, or the self-determination theory, is something that we should look at. And while we were hypothesizing that, we of course looked at the whole ecosystem of well-being. It's both well-being at the personal level and well-being at the organizational level. So well-being at the personal level, we define, and I think we can go to the next. Just went off. Yeah. So if we go to the next slide, which is not coming. So when we looked at well-being at the personal level as well as the organizational level, we kind of tried to figure out, when we were doing this hypothesis, what are these things that will increase self-determination. So we looked at well-being as one part of the hypothesis, as I said. And we said that let us look at physical, mental, and emotional well-being of people as the dimension of something which may have a correlation with self-determination. Now, there is another dimension of well-being, and Manish sir talked about it so much, from a Anandamaya Kosh perspective and Vigyanmaya Kosh perspective, the whole spiritual journey of consciousness. But that is something that we didn't study. We only focused on the part of physical, mental, and emotional well-being when it comes to an individual. And the state of well-being, does it have an implication on the overall self-determination of the organization or not? And from the workplace perspective, what causes citizenship behaviors the organization as the dimension which may have an implication on creating an environment and ecosystem where people can feel psychologically safe to contribute. So psychological safety important as well. So is organization providing a psychologically safe place to work? And the anchor that we took from psychological safety is about trust and the workplace trust. In trust, we looked at the dimensions of credibility that the leadership team, or the senior leadership team of the organization is bringing to the table. Consistency in the way things work in the organization, and camaraderie. And we actually studied a few organizations to look at this linkage of these two elements with the purpose and the work of the individual. So we said that if these two are high, then does a person relate better to the purpose of that organization and to the work that the individual is doing? So we found that this fitted in very beautifully, and we saw that there was a clear linkage and well-being focus of the organization, plus the workplace trust had a very direct linkage with the commitment of people to the purpose and their commitment to their work. So as we saw that, then we also had, when we were studying, of course, we were looking at self-determination as the most important aspect. We looked at whether this leads to higher self-determination. And when we looked at both well-being and trust, have the self-determination which comes from the purpose, autonomy, and the development focus in the individual, at the individual level also showed a higher correlation. So this whole thing fitted so well into the the initial well-being should have a linkage with the ecosystem, given that the ecosystem itself provides psychological safety to the people who work in the organization. Now correlate this back with the examples that Harpreet was sharing. From the point of view of these organizations, why does it make a great social sense? I will not call it, and we are actually in a situation where there's so much of crisis happening all around us. Uh, why does it make a social sense for an organization to invest in well-being? It's not just about this business outcome of performance. It's not just the outcome of business continuity, but why does it make more sense to invest in well-being from a social construct point of view? And we are seeing, the response of some of the organizations in keeping some of the organizations, and I think there are very few in India which take the lead, but those organizations that are focusing on well-being and how they're contributing to social contribution as well. And why I'm talking about social contribution again and again is because the more happier people and the more the people who can contribute better to their own well-being are also the people who actually are self-determined to contribute more and more to the society and the organization. So that is something that we studied very closely, and then we try to expand this whole argument into some other areas of study which we are currently undertaking. But this gave us insights on how should we actually craft the so-called engagement, so-called engagement strategies of the organization, and defocusing from some of the things which we end up doing in organizations in terms of celebrating, and all those things are still required, but fundamentally how are we increasing the well-being of the people from a physical, emotional, mental point of view, and providing them a psychologically safe place to work. Now other thing which we also found while we were studying all of this is there was an unusual find which was telling us that knowledge is a great knowledge is something which empowers the most, and knowledge is something which has a close relationship with the drive and the purpose of the individual. So when we looked at I look at it back, and the way Professor Manish was explaining how the student kept on reflecting, kept on looking at what is it that is deeper, what is it that is deeper, and started to gain knowledge one layer after the other, and reach the crux of the knowledge. So knowledge is something which empowers the most, and in organizations, it's not just about the practices. When we talk about well-being or trust, it's also about how we are actually, making sure that knowledge reaches at each and every corner of the organization. In fact, we were discussing something about empowered leadership in the morning with one of our clients, and there also conclusively, after 3-4 days of mulling over the whole concept, conclusively we reached the conclusion we reached that knowledge is something which actually empowers the most, and that is something which will actually drive people to focus more on the well-being aspect as well. So it's like a wheel. It's like knowledge empowers purpose, and purpose empowers one to be well, to be well as well, and the whole cycle runs. So well-being is not an isolated topic. It starts at one place and it takes on the course to build more and more purpose, and That is what I think Professor Manish was also talking about when he was speaking about Anandamay Kosh and Vigyanmay Kosh, where you are actually more and more becoming more and more aware, not just of yourself but the entire surrounding, till the entire universe is one, and you don't think of your own well-being as a subject, but the well-being of all around you, and that's something which was proven this way. Of course, we have seen that how Indian scholars have actually proven it much earlier, and the whole concept of well-being so well established from right from the gross level of bodily aspects to right to the consciousness aspects of being able to be in permanent bliss. So that is what we did, and I think just to sum up in one sentence, a person and reiterating person and organization is two parts of the same system. Whether we talk about person, team, and organization, or people who focus, people who are more focused on their own well-being are also the people who will be best organization citizens, and organizations that are focused on well-being will also create citizens which are more focused on both business and social objectives. So there's a submission from my side. Over to you, Harpreet. I think we are also nearing the end of our conversation. I will request participants to keep posting questions on the Q&A blog, and we can take questions whoever it is addressed to.
Yeah, thank you, Lokesh.
Yep.
Shall I start with the first question that was asked?
Yes, sir.
Sure, sir.
Oh, so there was one. So when we did this poll about the 5 koshas and what is it that we can focus on, and therefore it is asked as to why is discernment so low. For example, we were talking about these different koshas and the sheath of intellect, the discernment part, and therefore why did we get only 0%? Is it so difficult to define purpose in a crisis? It is asked. And I think whenever it is that we get to a crisis situation, I think instinctually, we are moved more into the loss frame rather than the gain frame. So there's this famous researcher in this area who starts saying that negative emotions, the negativity sticks to you like Velcro, whereas the positive slides you by as though it were poured on Teflon. And therefore, probably this fight, flight, freeze response that we get into in a crisis situation may probably be held kind of responsible for the kind of situation that we are seeing here. And therefore, in that particular case, it is likely that my concern is more about survival rather than it is about thriving. And therefore, if I am able to focus more upon myself, I will not have to kind of deal with those harder questions of the wider aspects of myself. So to be able to define one's purpose, though obviously they say that the crucibles of leadership. So there's a very beautiful HBR article in this area, and it talks about that. So maybe majority is moved more towards coming more inward, and I think it is true even for the economies. Okay, whether it is about made in USA or whether it is about the other things, and therefore you become that much more insular. And therefore it is possible that that might be the reason for what we are seeing here as well in our poll. Okay.
Yep.
Any other?
Second question. I think previous part of the webinar, Nivedita had missed. She's asking how many organizations were surveyed. So this data is the last part which I spoke about. It's based on 2 organizations that we studied, 2 very different kind of organizations. The third question, how does one bounce back from a sense of loss? It is believed that, so I will just read it out, it's slightly long. How does one bounce back from a sense of loss? It is believed that we will have fallen to 2016-17 business levels owing to the crisis. Many organizations are cutting pay and down by 25 to 30% to align costs accordingly. How does one carry on with the sense of loss that we could have been pushed a few years back? It is very difficult to ask employees to bounce back after they have set back in their mind. Okay. So I think some of the, sir, if you want to take that, but quickly, what I have in my mind is how is the pay cut done? Has it done with the credibility and the consistency that has been practiced in the organization? So organization ecosystem, has it been fair? Has it been done in a way that it is acceptable to people? And then on the second plane, I think personal plane, I will rather take a philosophical view that many a times we will come in situation where we make unusual profits, and there are many situations when we make unusual losses. Both should be equally acceptable so far as we are healthy and we are living, and we can make an effort in the direction of further well-being for ourselves as well as the social system that we are in. Sir,
So
any
Lokesh has
comments
spoken
on
both
the
as an HR consultant as also as an entrepreneur. Okay. And, and I would believe that if we go
Yeah,
back to our Panchkosha model that we talked about, so one is expanding
yeah,
upon Lokesh's point earlier, which is about this element of organizational justice. And therefore, we may have distributive justice as to who got how much. Second is that of the procedural justice, how did it get decided who's going to lose how much? And probably the interactional justice part. So how was I dealt with when I was told that this much of pay cut would be there? So that is as far as the HR policy is concerned. That is as far as that goes. But then coming back to that concept of self, I think this again is an opportunity, right? So that resilience part that we are talking about, I would believe that this sort of a situation is completely fit for the age of the resilient organization. Given that possibly this would be one of the most difficult challenges that most organizations would have faced, I think this is where the metal is going to get tested. Not only that for the organization, but also for the people who make up for that particular organization. And therefore, maybe if we can move that particular understanding, which is why I was talking about the purpose and the larger identity, and therefore, obviously, we can kind of expand the ambit of our consciousness to be able to see not only it is what is in it for me, but can I move the needle towards the we? The more I get there, and the more we are able to look at that continued sustainability for the organization and for the people, we may be able to go forward together.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I think one more question
Yes,
from
last
Dr. Nayak.
question.
How to make employees committed? Okay, how to make employees committed towards organizations those who are actively disengaged? Uh, Sir, I think if you may throw some light here. Yeah,
I think in a way it is about that identification part which has probably gotten disconnected, which is what we mean by
correct.
disengaged anyway. And therefore, would there be some way that we could make people feel a part of the organization? Which can only happen, I think, and that I would believe is a two-way street. You can't
Correct.
really treat people very badly during those challenging times and still feel they will still belong to the organization during the other times. It's going to be very, very difficult. And therefore, somewhere or the other, the kind of strong measures that we have been talking about in response to the last question, they need to start from the top, unless and until their higher ups show themselves as the role models. The people who are lower down do not really have so much to look up to. And therefore, am I walking the talk? Will I be able to demonstrate whatever it is that I'm asking others to deliver? And that way, I believe that, for example, they keep saying that the children do not do what you say, they do what you do. I would argue that that
Correct.
similar would be the case otherwise as well. That if I go to the Energy Conservation Week and I keep lecturing that this is what you should do, that is what you should do, and the audience there
Yeah,
knows that the two ACs in my room are still on, so that when I go back, I can get a comfortable environment. I think that is what prompts so much of disillusionment and disengagement inside the organization. And therefore, can I make my processes that much more fair? I talked about justice earlier. And from there, I think, am I myself a role model to be able to demonstrate? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think just to add, sir, I think one more thing that I think, particularly in context of this question, is the purpose motive is something. If it somewhere it is broken,
Very true.
so purpose motive is broken from an identity perspective, or people are not keeping their promises, and therefore I also don't keep my promises, or from the point of view of self motivation, or the absorption within the organization's objectives. I don't identify with those kind of objectives. So somewhere that purpose motive is broken,
Huh.
and I think that is something which should be worked upon and seen. Where is it broken?
Which I think, so if we look at that
Yeah,
Panchkosha aspect, I think once again, you could
yeah,
enlarge that and see it at the organizational level as well. So that purpose part which you see here in that Panchkosh part itself, it is about the Vigyanmaya Kosha. What is about that
yeah,
understanding? And therefore, am I able to demonstrate and make people align, claim citizenship for that larger identity? For example, everywhere we would be reading those stories about the Toyota way, about the IBM way, about the McKinsey way, etc., etc. And it is not about a single individual. It is about that particular part which is kind of purchased by people, swear by it. Am I able to
correct,
create that kind of an environment? And I think that is what it will take to take the organization higher.
correct, correct. I think Professor Rizvi is talking about a friend, about a question. A friend in need is a friend indeed. Who stands by you in difficult times? How can an employee believe that my organization cares for me or my well-being when I am thrown on the road when the situation goes tough? Absolutely, sir. I think unless that feeling of all of us are in it together, and I think Manish, who's Manish Prasad, I think he tells some great stories about Duracell, and how Duracell still is maintains the alumni association of workmen, and they all come in, and that's because the way the organization was closed, a fair deal was given to everybody, and how people just gel together so well, in the times of not crisis, but in the times of handshake when it was happening, when the company was being sold. So uh, so we are, if we are not in it together, then of course I think that's my view. I don't know if Professor Manish Singhal has yeah.
I'll try to respond to the other part of Dr. Rizvi's question, where he says that it is the easiest to cater to the pranamaya kosh so that it comes naturally and instinctively.
Yeah.
And I would believe that probably yes. But the point is that we are not as much conscious about it, right? And therefore, a kid who's natural, and therefore the diaphragmatic deep breathing that I was talking about earlier, yes, it does come naturally. But over a period of time, I think we condition ourselves to becoming unnatural and artificial. Okay. For example, if we look at our back is meant, constructed to be straight. Whereas today, after
Yeah.
years of misuse, all of us sit hunched like this. Okay, so naturally
Yeah,
that is what it was meant to be. But you and I, all of us have become used to sitting like that, which is unnatural.
yeah,
Okay, so no efforts required, yes, but, but are we really being mindful of it? And I think that is
yeah,
that is what it takes.
yeah,
So just to add on to what you've just mentioned, even if we see the nature itself, how it has healed during the time of crisis, and how many money the government would have spent in cleaning Ganga and Yamuna.
Yeah.
So, so I'm sure the nature has its own way to retrieve, and we are the ones who have actually spoiled it.
Okay, there's another point which has come up from one of my
yeah,
ex-students, Suma, and she
yeah,
asked, so there is this work from home, etc., same time upskilling ourselves for betterment. We may be saving commute time, but then what about those extra household chores, right? And
yeah,
particularly if your
yes,
spouse is a typical Indian husband, Okay. Okay. And therefore, how is it that you imbibe positivity? I think the situations, yes, are out there. How you meet them is the test of your character, isn't it?
Right.
So at one point of time, Ramakrishna Mission went into disaster relief, etc. And there were the brother disciples of Swami Vivekananda who asked him, "But these sannyasis are not supposed to be doing this, etc. Haven't you heard the master himself say that the society is like the bent tail of a dog?" Okay, Ma, I'm responding to your question. And at that point of time, Swami Vivekananda said, you are not doing it to straighten the tail of the dog. You are doing it so that you can strengthen your own muscles. What more positivity do we need? Okay. And therefore, how is it that we are able to kind of display that? That I think is the test of character.
Correct.
And resilience, which was the point that I was asked earlier also.
Yeah.
And Dr. Nayak, I think that is so. So the idea is whatever it is which is happening outside, the way you are responding to that, that is probably the test, isn't it? And therefore, could we take care of and display whatever it is that we want to do? I had earlier said about the role model, etc. And therefore, is that what you are able to demonstrate? Remember, each one of us is creating ripples around ourselves. Whether it is about your spouse, whether it is about your children, whether it is about your neighbors, anywhere. And therefore, what kind of fragrance are we spreading?
Yeah.
So once we take responsibility for that, I think many of these questions would get answered.
Yeah. And just to add, sir, I think how to remain motivated professionally and personally, maybe it is not required. If we are frustrated, then we should also express that. I think expression is very important, in whichever form and shape it comes. So maybe if we are not motivated, we should acknowledge that as well. And if we are motivated, we should acknowledge that. So in either case, we should acknowledge what we feel and, let it not come in the way of our well-being. Whether it's physical, mental, emotional, or spiritual. Yeah.
And I think if we go back to that Manomaya Kosha, which is about the seat of likes and dislikes, realize that you are the context in which all of this content is coming in.
Absolutely.
The more we are able to identify with that context, I think those sort of issues will get resolved.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
Okay, I think if there are no other questions, thanks for the audience to be here. I don't think we shot up our time too much. Maybe just 5 or 7 minutes. Over to you, Harpreet.
I think we have another question.
Oh, okay.
If we could, I think the last question, maybe we could address that.
Okay. Okay. Parth, I will allow the entrepreneur to answer this. Okay.
See, my view is very simple. And we have been discussing in our internal forums quite a lot on this. There's only what we can do, right? I think if something is not in our control, then that is not in our control. But then there are a lot of things which are in our control. So we just keep doing what is in our control and let the time pass. So, this crisis is not going to be there forever. This shall too pass, right? So this is going to pass. How are we engaging together to make sure that we go through this together and preserve cash? You rightly said that. Preserve cash in such a way that we don't go down under. So there are two things which are important. You should be willing to accept the fact that, I said that earlier also, profits will come and losses will come. And no business can run without both coming in at some point in time. Second is preserving cash, not just for the organization in the sense that, organization lives longer, but the constituents. People are the organization. So people should be able to run. And it's about people's expenditures and homes have to run. So that is where if an organization focuses on it, will go much longer in terms of its sustainability. So that is something, preserve cash for your people, and not just for yourself. That is something which is very, very important. And thankfully, there is some help coming in from the government in form of MSME loans, etc. Those are some things which will be available to you. But don't leave the well-being of your people, like Dr. Rizvi said sometime back. Don't let them on the road, because they are the organization. Organization is not its structure, not its factories, not its capital resources. It's the people. If there are right people, then you will also have right business. Unless you have somebody like some big business, self-reliance, and etc. etc. So where cash is the king. But for most, I think if we just focus on being good, I think good things will come our way. And things that we can control, we'll just keep doing them. Just keep doing them. So that's what my answer is. I'm sure if Manish was here, he would have Manish Prasad. He would have some very great insights on cash preservation. He is a great mind in the business transformation space.
Good. So, do we call it a day then?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
I
you.
think so.
Thank you,
Okay,
Manish, sir.
everyone,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Look forward
Thank you.
to
Thank
the
you, sir.
following webinar. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Signing off.
Thanks, everyone. Yep. Thank you.